Before diving into the chilling case of David Mason, let's take a moment to remember his victims, those whose lives were tragically cut short. Joan Picard, Arthur Jennings, Antoinette Brown, and Dorothy Lang were among the elderly who fell prey to Mason's brutal actions. Their stories deserve to be told with empathy and respect. Hey everyone, what would you say to the warden if you knew you had just minutes left to live? Most death row inmates use their final words to proclaim innocence, apologize, or say goodbye. But David Mason? He said absolutely nothing. And here's the crazy part. He didn't just accept his death sentence. He demanded it. So grab something to drink, hit that like button, and let's uncover the chilling final hours of David Edwin Mason. The making of a monster. David Mason wasn't born evil, in a stag. He was created by it. Born in 1956, the fourth of 8 children, his life was unwanted from the moment of his birth. His mother literally tried to cause a miscarriage by lifting heavy furniture and riding horses. Talk about a rough start, right? But what happened next turned a troubled child into something far worse. The Mason household wasn't just strict. It was a place where the guise of Christian discipline masked severe abuse. His parents regularly used belts and switches to enforce what they considered religious teachings, creating a constant atmosphere of fear. One particularly harrowing moment came later in his childhood. His mother, in a fit of anger, struck him excessively. The family often spoke of Mason's room as the dungeon, but what really cemented this terrifying image was the steel bars installed on his windows, almost as if he were a criminal trapped in his own home. The psychological damage was immediate and severe. At just 5 years old, Mason tried to kill himself by swallowing dozens of pills. By age 8, his father found him standing over his baby brother's crib with a knife. These early acts of violence and self-harm are not just tragic events in isolation. They are indicative of specific psychopathic traits, such as a lack of empathy and poor impulse control, which would come to define his later behaviors. The violence escalated from there, setting fires, attacking teachers, and terrorizing other children. Each act was a step further down a dark path, marking his transformation from victim to predator. But here's where it gets really disturbing: from victim to predator. When Mason turned 14, he finally reported the abuse to authorities. You'd think this would be his salvation, right? Wrong. The system failed him completely. He was sent to a boarding school where he claimed more sexual abuse occurred. Every time he escaped, they dragged him back. By 1980, Mason had transformed from victim to predator. And his hunting ground? Oakland, California. His targets? Elderly people living alone. Now, most people his age were figuring out dating and career paths. Mason? He was perfecting the art of breaking into the homes of senior citizens, not exactly the life skills you put on a resume. His first victim was Joan Picard, a 73-year-old woman who had known him for years and trusted him. She'd even shown him her home security system, a decision that would cost her life. Mason strangled her with a wire tourniquet after she tried to reach the alarm. His motive? Pure greed. He sold her valuable coin collection for just $85. But Mason was just getting started. Over 9 months, he would claim 4 more elderly victims. Arthur Jennings, 83, beaten and manually strangled Antoinette Brown, 75, beaten with a wrench, strangled with her own silk underwear. Dorothy Lang, 72, beaten with a wrench, found partially naked. Each murder was more brutal than the last. But what makes Mason unique isn't just the violence, it's what he did next. Hey, if you're finding this case as fascinating as I am, smash that like button and subscribe for more true crime content. Trust me, this story is about to get even crazier. Now back to Mason's most chilling act. The epitaph tape, writing his own death story. Here's where David Mason becomes truly unique in the history of crime. Weeks before his capture, he did something no other serial killer had done. He recorded a detailed confession of all his crimes onto a cassette tape. He titled it David E. Mason Epitaph and gave it to his brother, instructing him to keep it safe. Think about this for a second. This wasn't a confession extracted under interrogation. This was Mason choosing to tell his story on his terms, in his own words. He confessed to multiple murders, described details only the killer could know, and even explained his twisted motive, claiming he had freed his victims from the problems of the world. This tape became his death warrant. When police couldn't find him after a high-speed chase, his brother handed over the recording. The evidence was ironclad. Mason was arrested at a Holiday Inn in February 1981, but even behind bars, Mason wasn't done killing. The jailhouse execution. While awaiting trial, Mason added a fifth victim to his list, his own cellmate. Boyd Wayne Johnson was a 24-year-old who had become a police informant, cooperating in a rape and murder case. In prison culture, that made him a snitch. And snitches don't survive. Mason and another inmate cornered Johnson in his cell. Using a knotted towel as a garrote, they strangled him to death, then tried to stage it as a suicide by hanging his body from a shower rod. Mason even called the guards himself to discover the body. This murder was different from his others. It wasn't for money or sexual gratification. It was about power and prison hierarchy. Mason had fully embraced his role as a predator. The volunteer decision. After being convicted of 5 murders and sentenced to death, something unprecedented happened. Mason made a decision that shocked the legal system. He fired his lawyers and waived all his appeals. He became what's known as a volunteer, someone who actively seeks their own execution. This bold move raised important ethical questions about autonomy and mental health in death penalty cases. Some legal scholars argue that Mason's choice to volunteer for his own execution could be seen as an expression of personal agency and a desire to exert control over his fate. Others believe his troubled past and psychological trauma may have clouded this decision, raising doubts about his capacity for rational judgment. The competency hearing became a battle between 2 psychiatric diagnoses, PTSD from childhood abuse, making him incompetent antisocial personality disorder, but still rational enough to choose death. The court ruled Mason was competent. His traumatic past didn't negate his ability to make a rational decision about his own life, or in this case, his own death. But other death row inmates weren't having it. The next friend, rebellion. Here's where it gets really weird. Just weeks before Mason's execution, 3 career criminals, complete strangers to him, filed a legal petition to stop his execution against his will. They claimed to be his next friends, acting on his behalf. Imagine that phone call. "Hi, I'm a violent criminal you've never met, but I'm here to save your life whether you want it or not." Talk about unwanted help. Why would other criminals try to force Mason to stay alive? Because his volunteer status threatened the entire death row culture. Every inmate's identity was built around fighting the system through appeals. Mason was collaborating with the state in his own execution, and that was seen as the ultimate betrayal. The court denied their petition. Mason's date with death was set. On August 24, 1993, David Mason became the last person ever executed in California's gas chamber. He refused a previous meal, asking only for ice water. When the warden offered him final words, Mason said he had none. He'd already told his story on that cassette tape years earlier. But here's the truly chilling part. Witnesses described Mason remaining conscious for several minutes after the cyanide gas was released, making voluntary movements and appearing to suffer. One witness was reported saying, "It was like watching a man drown in slow motion, gasping for air that wouldn't come." Those eyewitness accounts became the evidence that ended gas chamber executions forever, with courts ruling it was cruel and unusual punishment. Fast forward to 2024, and we're seeing history repeat itself. Alabama just executed Kenneth Smith using nitrogen gas, the first time this method was ever used. Officials promised it would be quick and painless. Instead, witnesses reported 22 minutes of writhing and convulsing. So, here's my question for you. Do you think there's such a thing as a humane execution method, or will every new technology just create new controversies? And what do you make of Mason's decision to volunteer for death? Was it a rational choice, or the final act of a broken mind? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this case as disturbing and fascinating as I did, smash that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into true crime history. And speaking of controversial executions, Next week, we're exploring the case of Kenneth Smith, the man whose nitrogen gas execution has sparked international outrage and legal battles. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. I'll see you in the next one.